us some Pesach inspiration for about 15 minutes jointly, and then afterwards tell us a little bit what's going on with the coronavirus in Mauritius and how it affected your community, and then we'd like to ask you some questions.
So something interesting I saw, which I'd love to share with you, is actually about what's going to happen in a few days' time, on the 7th day of Pesach. The 7th day of Pesach, of course, we commemorate the splitting of the sea, which is perhaps the quintessential miracle. We all talk about miracles in the Bible. Like as kids or even as adults, everyone refers to the splitting of the sea. Like that was the miracle that God performed for the Jewish people. Yet when we think about the miracle itself, it's quite fascinating, because the way the Torah describes it, it says that the Jews walked into the sea, and there was a wall on the right of water, and a wall to the right of them, and a wall to the left of them of water. And as they went along, there was like fruit trees that the Jews, as they walked along, they grabbed the fruits from the tree and they gave it to their children. So the question which presents itself is, why does God need to make fruit trees in the middle of the splitting of the sea? And if you're going to make the sea split or make the Jews go through the sea, just make the whole sea dry. Why make a wall to the right and to the left? So the answer is as follows, and it's actually based on a fascinating book that I recently read, which is basically the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And I think this is probably one of the greatest attributes to, we think about some of the great sports stars that are of current era, like Tom Brady or even like Kobe Bryant. Like they're not, like anyone would say, they're not the most talented. There've been more talented people before, but they almost thrive on the challenge. Like for them to get up in the morning and to go out and to practice, Tom Brady doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, by all accounts, but he thrives on the challenge. And the same comes with the Jewish people at the time of leaving Egypt. How so? Because when they left Egypt, there was two things happening at the same time. They were leaving Egypt, and they were also preparing themselves for the receiving of the Torah. Now, to leave Egypt, that had to happen at the splitting of the sea. Why? Because that moment, Pharaoh and all the Egyptians, that's when they drowned. And it says that God then decided that the reason why he was saving the Jews was in preparation for receiving of the Torah. So why the right and the left? So this is fascinating. It's because we all know that right resembles, so to speak, chesed, resembles kindness, like expansion. And the left resembles gevura, which is almost like the strictness, almost like an introvert. So God almost essentially was telling the Jewish people like this: I don't want you to serve me because this is the natural way that you have been taught and the natural way that you know. As kids, we grow up. This is what we know. This is what our parents did. This is what our Zeders did. This is what our Barbers did. This is what we know. Our community is what we grew up with. So therefore, automatically, we want to go to shul. We want to learn Torah. So God was telling them, that has all been great until now. But now I'm challenging you to do something that is completely disregard your nature. Do something that is completely not in the realm of what you're used to. And that is how the sea, that is why, so to speak, God decided that the sea needed to split, not completely dry, but to the right and to the left, to show them that you need both of them. You need, so to speak, like this fixed mentality and this growth mentality. What do I mean? It's like, a child comes home from a test or from school, and you say, you know what, you're so smart. And the reality is, we shouldn't really say that. Why? Because if you tell a child that they're so smart, what happens to the child? The child then thinks to themselves, I'm so smart, I don't want to try anymore. Why? Because if I try, what happens if I fail? Right? It's like a boss who puts employees down because he knows that he's limited, so to speak, or because he doesn't want to change. And the essential aspect is that as parents or as people, essentially, we need to move into almost like a growth mindset, do things that's unnatural for us. For example, if let's say sometimes some people, it's hard for them to get up in the morning. We're not morning people. So we think to ourselves, I can never be a morning person until I have my cup of coffee, until the clock starts, hits 9 o'clock. But the reality is that we can change, and we can learn from people that all around us that have achieved greatness, specifically through pushing aside their natural inhibitions and saying to themselves, you know what, this is something that I could put my mind to and I could do. Some of the greatest people, the greatest musicians, or the greatest Olympians, and the greatest sports stars, they push themselves to a level which didn't exist by them, but they believed in themselves. And I think this is essentially what we're currently living. We're living in a reality where God has put us in a growth mindset, and we have to essentially rise to the challenge. We can come out of this lockdown. We don't know when it's going to end, but we can come back out of this with a fixed mindset. That's okay. This is what it was. We go back to normal. But is that really what we want to go back to? Is that really what's important? We should really move on to this idea that now's the chance for us to achieve greater degree of a relationship with our spouse, with our children, with God. And this is what happened on the 7th day of Pesach, which will be in a few days' time. The Jewish people reached this level of greatness, of a growth mindset that enabled them to leave Egypt and also go on the path to receive the Torah.
It's interesting to me. I love delving into the past, and as well trying to connect it somewhat, as Laima did, to whatever what's going on in our lives. And I'll give you all a little bit of history why we're currently not sitting in Mauritius. As Mauritius is an island, we have to import all kosher goods, especially when Pesach comes around. We've got to bring everything in. So months in advance, we secure permits so we can import everything. And this year was no different. Everything was on track until it wasn't. And we realized our permits were being canceled and imports were being slowed. And we had no chance of getting all the Pesach goods in that we needed. So Laima traveled to South Africa and just for 2 days to bring back as much as he could. And with all our calculating, we realized we would have to do a second trip. So we figured I would go with one of the kids, being with that I could get double the luggage. And also, so Laima left Sunday, arrived back in Mauritius Tuesday. I left Tuesday, and my flight back to Mauritius was Thursday morning with our 6-year-old Simma. And the bags were packed and all was ready. I was in South Africa, everything on track. And on Wednesday night, the Prime Minister in Mauritius closed the airport to all incoming flights. So now I'm in South Africa with our 6-year-old Simma. Laima is back in Mauritius with our other 2 kids, Sarah, who's 8, and Eliyahu, who is 3. And we're trying to figure this out at 10 p.m. at night. Okay, so what do? We know definitely there's a flight to South Africa tomorrow morning, as they have to still get some tourists out of Mauritius. But what do? How can we completely leave the community there? But at the same time, we have no idea how long this lockdown is going to last. And like this, our family would be apart for an unknown amount of time, as well as Pesach, etc. So we made the decision that Laima would get on the flight, get on the flight with the 2 kids and come to South Africa. So hurriedly packing at 3 in the morning. They left the airport at close to 5 in the morning to try get on the flight, which thank God they did, and arrived here in South Africa. And we were both really struggling with this, because we've always very strongly maintained we have two parts to our family. We have our immediate family, obviously ourselves, our children, our parents, our siblings, their children, but our community is equally our family. And how could, at a time like Pesach, how could we not be there? Especially at a time when there's so much uncertainty and chaos in the world. And we sat down, and Laima actually taught this very teaching to me, that sometimes you've got to dig within you to find and to sort of create the strength that you might think doesn't exist. And thank God we managed to arrange Pesach packages around the island, and we'll go into it shortly, how Pesach, etc., has been conducted over there. But to me, one phrase kept jumping out. We all know the phrase, Gam ze ya'avor, this too shall pass. And on the one hand, yes, that phrase is sometimes there just for us to hold on to our sanity. This too shall pass. I'll get over this. It will be fine. However this plays out, this too will see an end. But we started talking about it. How shall this pass? Shall it just pass, just like the person who is alive simply because they're breathing? Or will this pass in a way that I breathe life into it? In a way that I breathe positivity into it? And that's not saying for a moment that every minute of every day is going to be smiles and rainbows and sunshines, and everyone's only going to gaze lovingly at their beloved and never raise a voice at their children, and everything's just going to be so wonderful and hunky-dory. Quite the opposite. Are we able to bring the positivity into the regular daily life? And from a woman's perspective, a woman a few times throughout in biblical contexts and by the rabbis is called the house, the home. And in my own opinion, I don't think it's by any chance that we are now confined to our homes. It's almost, sometimes in life you feel, I wish I could have taken a different turn. I wish I could rewind to a certain place. But now it's almost as if we've all been pulled to another starting line. We've all been pulled back home. We have the opportunity to say, how is this going to pass? When I walk out of my front door after this chaos has somewhat subsided, I have the opportunity and I have the chance to walk out in whichever way I want. I can take that right wall and that left wall and help myself to find such a strength within me that I will truly be able to say, wow, I was able to make, as Laima said, a Tom Brady out of this. Maybe I didn't have the strongest throwing arm, but I could really find that strength. And of course, being Pesach, being freedom, the holiday that it's all about freedom and breaking the chains, all we can keep thinking and knowing is that at the time that the Jews were in this terrible situation, so before Moshe and Aaron had begun their intervention with the 10 plagues, they say the suffering of the Jews was out of 100, a level 30. It wasn't zero, it wasn't nothing. It was pretty bad. But then all of a sudden, with each plague, it got worse and worse and worse. And finally, by the 10th plague, their suffering had been escalated to 100% suffering. It was completely terrible. Now, what happened then? Hashem didn't begin to slowly bring down their suffering back to 90%, 80%, 70%. What did he do? It was in the blink of an eye, keherafayin. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Hashem lifted them out and took them out of this insanity that they had begun to think this was their normal. And I think that's the the only way we can think of this, that hopefully within a blink of an eye, our insanity would end.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So you said you were going to tell us about what Pesach looked like in Mauritius without you being there.
So thank God our Sedorim have grown by leaps and bounds. Our first Seder, public Seder we held, we had about probably 20 people. And last year we had about 140, close to 140 people last year for our first night Seder.
Wow.
And
how many of them would you say were locals and how many were visitors?
I would say about 80, 85% were locals. And then
like
this year
we population.
Sorry?
It's almost like half the Jewish population was
at least. At least.
It's a known thing. First night Rosh Hashanah and Pesach Seder, the community shows up out of the woodwork. It's phenomenal. I mean, as far as you could think Mauritius is, we always tell the joke, there's easy directions to get to Mauritius. If you just go to the end of the world and turn right, it's right over there. So to think that there's a Seder with 140 people, and then a couple months ago, Laima, what we were on track for?
It was this year we were projecting about 250. Recently Israelis found out about Mauritius, and they've been coming by literally the plane loads. So Baruch Hashem, we've been very busy. And there were 3 flights supposed to arrive right before Pesach, and many people were contacting us to join our Seder, of course. And we obviously went to work, and even though we weren't there, we have, thank God, we secured to have in Mauritius. We had shmura matzah, we had regular matzah, we had meat, we had wine, we had grape juice, we had maror. So we got our staff at the Chabad house to pack the care packages, and we sent to over 60 families like a Seder to go, and the pictures and the Seders that went on were quite incredible to think that a lot of these Jews, even they come on a Shabbos. So during the week we don't have a minyan. Our shul only runs on Shabbos itself, unless of course during the peak season. There's a few hotels that have minyanim every day, 3 times a day. But during the year, regularly it's Friday night and Shabbat morning, and the Jews that come are quite unaffiliated. There's a lot of intermarriage, unfortunately, and even the Jews that are married to Jews, their knowledge of Judaism, the history of Judaism, genuinely is not so good, and even if they do know, it's not so great. So to see them, we started a few WhatsApp chats, and it was literally going of all hours. Everyone was helping each other to make sure everyone had matzah and wine and grape juice, and people didn't know how to make charoises, and there was recipes, and there was matzah ball soup going, and it was really, really amazing. And in a way, it brought out a spark of people that's, I myself didn't even think was there, in a way. And I was quite, just looking at all the pictures and all the chats and the way people literally were coming to the party. It was quite incredible.
So is the country on lockdown now?
Yes. So Mauritius actually 3 weeks ago went into a complete lockdown. They even shut all supermarkets and everything. They did a week of complete shutdown, and since then, it's still been in complete lockdown. They have opened up the supermarkets. You're only allowed to shop on your allocated day as per your last name. And being that it is a relatively small island, there's about 1.2 million people living in Mauritius. They had to act swiftly in order to contain the virus over there, especially the medical facilities there wouldn't be able to handle any big numbers. And thank God they've done a very good job of it. They did just extend, 2 days ago, they did just extend until the beginning of May. So, but thank God, you know, we were big believers that as much as we do what we need to do, the government heads are doing what they need to do to put this behind us.
How many cases? Yeah, go ahead.
So how many cases? There's a few hundred cases, but we were discussing it actually the other night. We're like saying, you know, what are the merits? You know, we look what's going on in America. Of course, we have a lot of family in the States, and I lived in Brooklyn for 4 years. So, what are the merits? You know, we were a little frustrated, to be honest, in the beginning when they did shut it down. They shut the whole country down without, you know, much notice. But at the same time, I think, you know, ultimately this is something which the world has never seen such a thing like this, at least for sure in modern times. And I think it's a responsibility of governments to save lives. You know, as Jews, we know the greatest thing is pikuach nefesh, more than anything. We were actually, even before the government decided to shut the country down, and before officially cases were revealed in Mauritius, we already sent out an email to our community declaring that the shul on Shabbat will be closed until further notice, and our Pesach Seder, as of now, was going to be cancelled, and people were a little bit upset about that. But the reality is that as Jews, and we know that ultimately, you know, everything, Shabbat, Yom Kippur, everything has to supersede in order to save, or even the suffix, even perhaps to save a life. And in this situation, unfortunately, we are seeing so many people. We all know so many people who are unwell and who need really God's mercy and God's blessing for Laima. And we ask God continuously, and we say Tehillim for them. But this is the responsibility, and I think governments, initially we were a bit frustrated, but essentially we were quite impressed with the way that they went about locking down the country so swiftly.
Funnily enough, also, so the week after Laima arrived with the kids, we opened our phones after Shabbos, and we saw that all over all the different Mauritian expat Facebook groups, except WhatsApp groups, there had been a resident repatriation flight to Mauritius, but Hashem had his plans how he wanted them, because the flight was announced Friday evening. The flight took off Shabbos morning. We saw it after the fact. And even those repatriated were then placed in quarantine centers. And thank God, in a place like Mauritius, it's not, you know, if you think of it, halls in public schools, etc., or difficult detaining centers. Many of the hotels, including 4- and 5-star hotels, have been given over to the government to become quarantine centers. So the pictures we are seeing from people who made it back and were in 14 days of quarantine are not as terrible. It is quarantining in paradise, but it's quarantining nonetheless. And so we know we are where we have to be.
Wow. How spread out are the Jews in Mauritius? Like how far do you have to travel to get to the Chabad house from different parts?
So in the place where we live, like in the complex where we live, there's quite a few families who live near us. Those are mainly almost Shomrei Shabbat families, and are near us. We have quite a few families as well within walking distance, and then you have families all around the island. I mean, to get from point A to point B, like, you know, from the bottom to the top, so to speak, it's almost about a 2-hour drive. But because it's an island, a lot of the Jews like to live, like many people, like to live along the coast and for the sea view. But on Shabbat, generally, we can get anywhere between about 40 to 50 people on a Shabbat morning who come to shul and stay. My wife makes always a lavish lunch after shul, and we sit down, we enjoy Sudat Shabbat together, and we sing songs, and we share words of inspiration, and we we thank God afterwards, and it's a real highlight for the week.
Someone asked the question: are there young families there too with children? Do you have a Hebrew school or any youth activities?
Yes, thank God. So it's a very vast community in regards to the different demographics. There are obviously many retirees who live there. Mauritius also is a financial hub because of it is a tax haven. So there's a lot of financial institutions based over there. So there are many people who live there with young families, etc. And thank God we have Talmud Torah, our Hebrew school that runs 5 days a week. We have teachers that we bring in from France. And being, as Laima was just saying, how the island is, so we're in the north of the island, and most of the community is located over there, but there are people all over. So we have 3 times a week in the north for different age groups, the Talmud Torah, and then our Talmud Torah 3 times a week also travels around the island. So the teachers will travel an hour or an hour and a half in each direction, and then we do classes on the different places in the island. But thank God, I mean, this year alone, we've celebrated 3 bat mitzvahs, 2 bar mitzvahs, namings in shul. It's a flourishing community. Often we look at each other and we're like, is this really the Mauritius that we moved to? Because thank God, we're really seeing growth in the younger demographic as well.
Wow. How many hours flight is it from, you said that flights were coming from Israel. How many hour flight is it from Israel to Mauritius?
So from Israel, it's about 7.5 hours. And from South Africa, which is the closest like Jewish community, it's 3.5 hours. So all our meat products we bring from Johannesburg, and all our like milk and yogurts and dairy products we bring from France. Just got to do with the quality of the products, but at the same time it's always a mission. We have to get permits, and we have to wait for them to come, and we have big freezers, and we have to bring in, at a time we always bring in a lot just for ourselves, also for the Chabad house, also for people in the community as well, thank God. And but also, Baruch Hashem, as we've seen year in, year out, the country is also developing more and more, and the supermarkets carry a vast majority of basic kosher products, which is extremely helpful to us and to the community and to travelers as well.
As Laima just said, it's about a 7.5 hour flight from Israel, but it's interesting to note, at the beginning, Laima was speaking about how when we came to Mauritius, there was hardly anything Jewish over there, aside from the cemetery that is there. So a little bit of history into Mauritius. Actually, during the war, there were 2 ships that had come from Europe and had been sent to Israel. And the British did not allow them in. And Mauritius was under British rule at that time. And they didn't know what to do with him. So they said, we're going to send these ships over to Mauritius until we can figure out what to do with these people. And they sent the 2 ships over. And terribly, one of the ships sank on the way. The second ship arrived there, and the British and then Mauritian authorities had no idea what to do with these Jews. And they actually put them in a prison over there, and they put them in this ghetto prison, and until the war was over, left them over there. They didn't know how to properly deal with them. And that's when the cemetery came about. There's 127 graves from that time, and afterwards they were then sent back to Israel. But it's interesting to note that from that time, Mauritius and Israel have a very interesting relationship, and the Mauritians hold Jews and Israelis in very high esteem. Thank God, last year we got, for the first time, Mauritius officially acknowledged Israel in regards to diplomatic relations, and there now is an Israeli ambassador to Mauritius. He doesn't stay in Mauritius. He's also the Israeli ambassador to South Africa, and he stays here, but he's the ambassador over there as well. And thank God, it's a very, very strong and blossoming relationship, which has been a lot of nachas for us, thank God.
Wow. Did those Jews who came there, did they build a shul or any Jewish infrastructure?
No. So the records that we have, it says that they had some sort of gatherings, which they didn't keep the records of that. But from our research, it seems like they definitely did gather together on when they could for davening and for a minyan, but they didn't build a shul. And now there's been a museum that's opened up to commemorate them. And in last year, we did the first kavura, we did the first burial of a Rebbe from Englishman who's lived in Mauritius the last 20 years. And unfortunately, 65, he passed away, and we did the Tara, we did a full minyan and a burial for him, and he was the first person to be buried in that cemetery since the Second World War. And this year in August, officially, unless we don't know what's going to happen, but officially the plan is to commemorate the 75th anniversary, of course, since the Jewish people who were in Mauritius and turned there were freed and were able to go back to what is now Israel. Wow. So it's a rich history there, and it's a fascinating place. And Baruch Hashem, every year during whenever we have Yizkor, so Baruch Hashem, our parents are alive, but we always name the 127 people. We always mention them, and we always they have a legacy in the country, and
who takes care of the cemetery?
So we have there is a board of people that manage it, and it's obviously in the last number of years it was restored, and it's kept quite well, actually, thank God.
So that's where you buried this individual who died?
Yeah.
Interestingly, from those original Jews who arrived there, obviously some Jews remained there, and some Jews had somewhat married into Mauritian families, and quite a few times I've seen people in stores or whatever it is that have a Magen David or a menorah on a necklace, and I've asked, "Oh, excuse me, are you Jewish?" "No, my grandfather was," or "I got it from my grandfather who had a close friend at that time." And there's been very many beautiful stories. Laima, it's called the Mauritian Shekel. You can probably find it online. There's a book, The Mauritian Shekel, that it's written by a Mauritian woman, not a Jewish woman, Genevieve Pito, I believe. And it's a very interesting read into the rich history over there.
I have two questions that came up here. One is, do you think at some point you will produce your own kosher food? And the second question is, what kind of work, industry, and export takes place on the island?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is yes. 3 months ago, we actually did the first shchita in Mauritius. We brought a shochet from South Africa, and we did shchita for 500 chickens. It was quite an experience. I am not a shochet myself, but the need was there for the community and also from the travelers, and thank God it went pretty successfully. And we actually secured the plant again at the beginning of Nisan to do again before Pesach, and unfortunately that fell through. But yes, we 100% plan to continue doing that every 2 or 3 months to do shchita, because the quality was great, and the accessibility and the price for the community was extraordinary. We were, people were able to buy at the local price. They didn't have to pay for the import fees and all the extra taxes that come along with bringing it from South Africa. So thank God that was a really big step for our community. And second question?
Oh, in regards to the second question, so first of all, the biggest export out of Mauritius is sugar. Most of Mauritius still is sugarcane fields, as well as schmatters, clothing. It's a very big textile hub. And as mentioned, it is become quite a financial location as well. I know there's a lot of oils, etc., that are exported. A lot of people deal in different body lotions and all of that. I think mostly it's exported into Europe, a little bit into India, maybe South Africa and other African countries. But I would say that's probably from our knowledge, and obviously not for export, but the biggest industry in Mauritius is tourism. It's a huge tourist destination. I mean, if you do yourself a favor and just Google Mauritius, you'll come up with quite a few nice pictures, and most probably none of them are photoshopped.
Wow. And what's the main language on the island?
So the main language obviously is English, but also French is also like the main language, and then there's
Creole.
Also like a dialect of French, which is Creole,
like in
which is almost like a poor man's French as well.
Wow.
So my wife, thank God, is quite a good
we're getting there.
linguist. She speaks a number of languages, so she's already quite fluent with French, and I'm on the way there. We just did the Manishtan in French, and I have a French tutor, and I have my father who's constantly on my head about it to make sure that my French is continuously growing more and more.
Do you have a mikveh there?
So not yet. We don't have a mikveh yet. So we use the ocean. Thank God we have access to a few beautiful 5-star hotels, which are really magnificent. The water is warm and it's clear. So thank God for that. And Baruch Hashem, we're in the process of securing a land and the permit and the funds to build a mikveh.
And what do you do for your children's education?
So our kids are in the Shluchim office, the Chabad online school. And we also, as we spoke about earlier, we bring out girls from France to teach the Talmud Torah, and they also teach our kids. And thank God, so far it's going well. And it's for us, a lot of the regular online schooling and homeschooling moms. This was an interesting thing to see the rest of the world having a peek into our regular lives, and not that we would wish it on anyone,
right?
But it's So thank God. I mean, being here, our kids with their cousins, etc., has been a huge treat, and obviously in a place like that, and in a time like today in 2020, when you have your online resources and the world is literally at your fingertips, it's not as much of a struggle as it would have been 20 or so years ago.
Wow. Do you have any idea when you're going to be able to go back?
Officially, the lockdown in South Africa is until the end of this month, and the lockdown in Mauritius is till the beginning of the next month. So we're hoping beginning of May. We're optimistic, of course, but we are also, constantly checking and looking into what's going to happen with the airport. We have quite a few connections with a number of the airlines there, and we've been in touch with them almost on a daily basis as well. And we'll have to see. We'll just have to take it day by day. I think in this situation, as I said initially, it's a situation which is challenging for everybody, I think. But it's a time to really rise to the challenge, and to get into like a growth mindset, in the sense that we're not sure what's going to happen, but whatever will happen, it's going to change us and change, all of us for the better.
Amen. We hope so. Could we have maybe Sarah speak to you about arranging a Palm Beach Shabbaton in Mauritius?
Done.
We would love to get one of those resorts you just talked about, maybe.
Yeah, I think we should do it. When should we do it? Let's plan it now.
I'm ready. Whenever you tell us to go, we're gonna. As soon as things open up, I'm sure everyone online would be in for this as well. How many hours to Florida?
Well, that's the only part I don't think we should talk about. When I recently traveled to Florida, I went, I think, through Dubai. So it's about, I think we have 14 hours from Dubai and 6 hours. So Mauritius, Dubai, 6 hours, and then 14 hours
to Dubai,
to Florida or whatever it is. It'll take you close to a day, but we'll make sure that you rest up well and it was worth your travel.
It sounds very much like Palm Beach, a little bit like paradise over there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful. They say that Mark Twain said that Mauritius was created first, and from that paradise was copied after something.
Gan Eden was copied after that.
Something along those lines.
Wow. Do you still appreciate the beauty every day, or you take it for granted at this point?
I think sometimes you listen, like anything in life, you definitely take it for granted, but there are some moments and there's some places when you go to, when you're driving, when you're going visiting somebody, and it just literally, you stop for a second and just takes your breath away. And you're like, wow, this is Hashem's world. It's amazing.
It's a big blessing. And, I could only imagine what it's like over there, but it's remarkable that there are shluchim out in places like Mauritius. I think for me and for many people, nobody even knows there's a Jewish community, let alone a Jewish history there. So whether we make it there or not, we wish you continued hatzlach in everything you do. And it sounds like you're building from the ground up and you have a lot of work ahead of you and you've done a lot of things. So it's an exciting adventure. And the main thing is everyone should stay safe and well. And I guess, thank God, with technology, you could still stay in touch with your community now through the internet and things like that.
Thank you. Wishing you all a happy and healthy and kosher rest of your Pesach, and looking forward, most probably when we visit Sarah and Yossi on that side, to meeting you all.
I think it's high time we come to Palm Beach.
Have you been in Palm Beach yet?
Not yet.
So I have, but unfortunately not as much in the community as I would have wanted to. So
we could do the Mauritius Shabbaton in Palm Beach.
We could do that.
We'll come for Ellie's birthday. I think it's in about 2 weeks from now.
That's it. We're starting to quarantine now.
Well, thank you again for your time. I know it's quite late by you, but we feel like we've made friends at the other end of the earth. And the whole idea of this is to show we're all one big family, wherever we are. We may feel isolated or quarantined, but we have family all over the world.
Absolutely.
We have Mishpacha in Mauritius, so if we're ever at that end of the world, we could pop in for Shabbos and know we'll get a warm welcome.
Always.
We'll be waiting.
Thank you very much.
All the best.
Kultov.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.